Can I please have Eddie Gomez to the stage? Eddie is Corporal Dan Grove's significant other, and he will be sharing his story.
So there's definitely a theme here, a couple themes. Family, number one. Number two, it's how they lived. And with Dan, it's especially true. Dan lived for all of us from day one. Unfortunately, our journey was very short. We were only together 2.5 years, but they were the most intense 2.5 years that either of us had ever felt. We moved in together about 4 months after meeting each other, decided this was it, we were the ones. And Dan never let go. I had had a stroke about 8 years before meeting Dan. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt whole. He didn't see me as half a person like I did. And he made me see that I wasn't half a person. Dan was he was determined to make sure that everybody knew that they were loved. I think a lot of that had to be his upbringing. He was very close to his family. They were very close. We went in herds. So his mom made sure that you were at every birthday party, you were at every anniversary. It didn't matter if it was the youngest niece and nephew to the oldest aunt and uncle. You were expected to be at that party, and Dan made sure everybody was there and everybody had fun and was taken care of. Dan had worked up in the mountains with some of the trooper that is here today, and Dan would host parties up there for the troopers in his group, and he made sure everybody had the right alcohol and the right food, and he didn't care the expense. He made sure that even if you had one drink, he was going to buy that alcohol for you. And this theme kind of carried on with me. He made sure that I had everything that I needed, everything that I wanted, and I made sure that I felt loved. Dan grew up in going to Catholic school, and that went into a Catholic college. And so for the first 40 years of his life, Dan wasn't really sure that he was in a safe space to be able to come out. And it wasn't until he really found his family at the Colorado State Patrol that he was able to be himself and was able to be accepted and to be part of the Blue family. And he was so supported by the Colorado State Patrol. And that bled into me. And I became part of the Blue family once we lost Dan. And they have not let go. They have continued Dan's journey of making sure that I'm loved and that we're all loved and that I'm taken care of. Dan was very determined. So determined that he went through FTO 3 times just to make sure we got it right. Dan was a corporal, and Dan went through many interviews to be a corporal. So determined that he went through 40 plus interviews and finally became a corporal. And he was so happy and so excited and so proud to be able to take care of his troopers. And he wanted to make sure those troopers knew their job and were safe at their job. And should something come up when they went to court, that every one of their reports was grammatically correct. If not, you got that report back. So Dan didn't make the best friends when he became corporal, but he got the best troopers. And Dan made sure they were taken care of and that they were going to succeed because it was his mission to make sure everybody succeeded. Dan was probably the most loyal person that I've ever met. It didn't matter if you had seen Dan as a friend 2 years ago or 20 years ago. He was going to make sure he was by your side and was there for you for whatever you needed. His fraternity brothers were some of his closest friends, and he made sure that each one was taken care of if they needed anything at all. I remember driving home from Chicago after visiting Dan's family, and one of his fraternity brothers was not doing well. And so another one of their brothers called and said, Dan, Rob is on the edge. He's gonna jump. Dan stopped the car in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, and made sure that he pulled that guy back off the ledge before we continued to go home. And that's just who Dan was. He just wanted to make sure everybody was loved, felt safe, and was okay. And because of that, Dan brought me here to be able to share with you a little bit of who Dan was, so that we can all know that we're all in a safe, loving family place. So as each one of you go forward and we leave here today, just remember that we're going to live our lives as our partners did, our wives, our friends. And I ask of you today to continue your journey and live like Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. In addition to Eddie, joining him today is Chief Packard, Captain Juchum, several other members of the Colorado State Patrol,